Part 17, English Syntax.
We've seen how taking a prescriptive stance to English lends itself to overly simplistic explanations, which limits English's inherent flexibility and undermines its truly idiosyncratic nature. This in turn means that learners come to expect straightforward solutions. Moreover, the current traditional and confined approach to English analyses, and this applies not least to syntax, means that learners rarely get beyond a level of intermediacy. And this is typically the case for those who are restricted to formal and theoretical study of the target language. This section will highlight aspects of word order and sentence structures that are on the one hand more quote-unquote rigid due to an inherent English logic, but also those which are more flexible on the other. There's no denying that non-complex independent clauses follow basic syntactic conventions, which generally speaking follows the following order: the who subject, the what the action, situation, or state, an object complement in some cases, plus, when verbalized, the where, location or direction, and or the when, a time adjunct, followed by the why, purpose or reason, using a to clause or a noun phrase, and or the how, prepositional clause, comprising a preposition plus a nominal or adverb, etc. These, however, are not rules as such. Syntax is more flexible than is generally presented to learners. Not only that, but there are several alternative or flexible structures, as we shall see, of which textbooks generally only scratch the surface. Course content designers assume these are too complex to deal with until much later, and only once the student has paid hundreds of dollars to find out it's not actually that rigid. There are few exceptions. One can say that the use of question tags are more rigid, but even the more apparently rigid formulation alters once modality is applied. One may certainly discover early on that the time adjunct may be fronted to initial position without much change in meaning, and that the location factor, if verbalized, generally sounds more natural in English when it precedes the time factor when stated. Few, however, will come to learn that outweighing the default sequence that the two may just as well be inverted post-verbally, through a process of prosodic planning, when the speaker wishes to embed the time factor, giving it more emphasis. Style, rhythm, and clarity, therefore, take precedence, not to mention context, as I've repeatedly stated throughout this essay. Though some grammar book may mention that English is in weight, meaning that what falls at the end of a sentence bears more weight, few realize that it is actually that which comes in penultimate position contains the key information, not what comes at the very end, such that when the time adjunct does come before the location, for instance, it now becomes the ream of the statement. Fronting the time adjunct in initial position doesn't really put the focus on time, since the ream remains in penultimate position. This phenomenon is more evident in written discourse, since the reader cannot be expected to know which set of words get more intonated than others.
I will go into that aspect more in depth in Part 18.
Reasoning typically precedes manner in most natural sentence constructions, but these as well may be inverted. Here's an example.
This morning, the teacher gave a lesson to the students to help them by providing them step-by-step instructions.
In a ditransitive structure, the indirect object precedes the direct object.
This morning, the teacher gave us a lesson with step-by-step instructions.
You'll notice that the latter construction avoids two to clauses found in the former. Note that my replacing by giving them with, though it is less wordy, risks introducing ambiguity in most other contexts, and so one need be aware of the alternatives for avoiding possible ambiguity. And so, knowing such alternatives actually helps with the learning process. We saw in parts 7 and 14 that simplification is a factor that causes confusion for pre-intermediate level learners of English if they are not made aware of just how idiosyncratic syntax, among other factors, is, insofar as a particle like to hinting at direction towards a result or condition, is ingeniously fronted or then omitted altogether, as say with verbs like let for allowance, or the manipulative make, or then optional with certain verbs like help. Odd to the non-native ear, since purpose, the why, is placed before the complement in the event we apply two verbs, and before a time adjunct when explicitly stated, given that purpose, the why, is implied using a particle for or to before place and time, as with be plus go or other verb affixed by ing plus to. Similarly, we saw in Part 2 how the existential have serves to imply situation or experience. We saw in Part 9 how have is oddly sandwiched between a modal and resultative adjective, so-called past participle, more useless, confusing nomenclature, for unreal past contexts, so-called third conditional, again. It is also used in causative statements like
I'm having my car serviced.
where have serves the same role in all cases.
I have left my car at a garage to be serviced.
I will have to fetch it when it's ready.
Here, it means the situation calls for the speaker to fetch his car once it's in working order, or it is expected of me to. The last example indicates the so-called normative, as outlined in Part 7, because of the to particle.
Prepositional stranding.
Puritans and prescriptive grammarians that came after Shakespeare, such as John Dryden, to name just one, took to Latin in error for justifying proper English grammar, criticizing, among other things, prepositional stranding, where the preposition is left to the final position. For instance, they will admonish using in and up in the sentence,
That's the house I grew up in.
as it exhibits quote-unquote poor syntax, saying that one should have instead to say something like
That's the house in which I was raised.
instead. If Shakespeare, and likely others, employed prepositional stranding, why should anyone object to it? In Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, Act 1, Scene 2, we find an example of prepositional stranding.
Leonato.
How now, brother? Where is my cousin, your son? Hath he provided this music?
Antonio.
He is very busy about it. But, brother, I can tell you strange news that you yet dreamt not of.
Antonio and Leonato, by the way, are of upper-class standing. In Othello, Act 1, Scene 1, the venerable soldier Iago says,
I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for jackdaws to peck at.
Other examples of prepositional stranding are as follows.
What are you looking at? This is the book I was referring to.
It's something I can do without.
Moreover, there are hundreds and hundreds of queer phrasings. Take, for instance,
There you go.
Here you are.
Long time no see.
Up you go.
By the by.
My bad.
Go figure.
Make do with.
Till next we meet.
or how about in the below example instead of something found in the example below? If need be, meaning if necessary at one time or other. Then there's Germanic syntax for expressing agreement, as in, so do I, neither do I, nor do I, and so on and so forth, and so forth, and so on. Mind you, so-called grammar rules are broken to make a point, to stand out, and break 'em we will, because the English mind knows that such formalities are all too often superficial, out of place, and what have you. The only features of the English language I can identify that qualify as truly grammatical ones are those that stay unchanged despite the flux, and these are the royal order of adjectives and adverbs, and the somehow commensurate quote-unquote irreversible binomials, both of which you can find as a separate PDF found here, not to mention in my complete ebook Insider English Bundle, available on several sites in 3 different currencies. In the next and final section, I shall outline the differences between the spoken and written art of communication, and how English being N-way in nature means that altering syntax might not actually change the focus, despite clefting and fronting, etc., unless one's intonation, in speaking, alters the otherwise intrinsic phenomenon I have come to call penultimacy.
I have to run quickly down the street each morning after breakfast to catch my bus to school.
Useful is to ask the key questions in this order. I have to run. How? Quickly. Where? Down the street. How often? Each morning. When? After breakfast. Why? In order to catch the school bus.